It is time for my favorite subject. Let's talk about the economy. January's inflation report is out. But before we look at that, I want to remind you, we have had 26 consecutive months below 4% unemployment. We have not seen that in decades. That is awesome. And our post-pandemic economic recovery is better than any other country in the world. Also awesome. However, we are still stuck with very high prices. And today's data shows that prices of the things that we rely on most, like food and housing, still cost a whole lot. Here now to discuss Guy Adami, an original member of CNBC's Fast Money, and Ben White, a CNBC contributor and beloved business reporter. Ben, lay this report out for us, because two things can be true, right? We could have a very strong economic recovery. However, life's expensive. You need to eat. If you need to live somewhere, prices are high.
Yeah, housing was a big part of inflation being higher than we'd hoped it would be. And you're right. This economy is complex. It's slightly confusing. The things that you mentioned that are good, job growth, consumer spending, GDP, all good. They are not, however, exactly what the Fed wants to see. And the Fed wants to see inflation get down to 2% annually. It was 3.1 today, higher than 2.9% expectations. And Guy, I don't know about you, but what bothered me was the month-on-month number, 0.4. If you extrapolate that over a year, you're talking 4 to 5% inflation, and the Fed will not stand for that. And Wall Street obviously was hoping for rate cuts quickly, maybe as soon as March. Not going to get them, probably not until summer, maybe later. That means no goosing the economy further for President Joe Biden. So not a great report for him, albeit the other parts of the economy are doing well. But people care about prices, and they care about them not falling the way they'd like.
The truth matters, but only if you hear it. So here's the truth. They're not winning the war on inflation. Inflation isn't going down. It's just going up less fast. And people watching this will be like, the administration says we're winning the war on inflation. No, they're not, because they see auto insurance was up 20.6%. So if you have to pay for auto insurance, everything's fine. If you don't have to pay for over-the-counter drugs, which was up like 9.8%, everything is fine. All the things that cost money, all the things that are in your daily life are going up. And people talk about, this great economy, which it is on the surface, but things are costing more. And when the president goes on TV and ridicules companies because the 16-ounce box of Cheerios is now 12 and they're charging the same price, guess what? That's inflation, too. The companies will say, you know what, President Biden?
Wrong.
He's not wrong, except that if they want to play the 16-ounce box, it's just going to go up by 25%. Inflation is sticky as hell. People understand that. And that's why, in terms of the economy, the administration's approval rating is probably less than 35%.
So how do they solve for this? Because there are lots of very positive factors in this economy, and we don't have the supply chain issues that we once had. So where do we go from here?
Well, I'll say this. It's not entirely President Biden's fault. I mean, the seeds of inflation were sown long ago. I mean, I'll go back to 2018 in October, under the Trump administration, when President Trump, who as candidate Trump, talked about a bubble being created by the central banks, by the Federal Reserve, helping the Obama administration. As President Trump, he said, hey, interest rates are too high. He browbeat that guy into lowering rates. That started it. The tax cuts came at the exact wrong time in the cycle, and then things started to move from there. You talk about Putin's inflation. Yeah, maybe. Nobody saw it coming. He had 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. What do you think was going to happen? So a lot of this stuff, if you were just paying attention, you could have combated.
Yeah, I would say, it's not fair to say that they've completely lost the war on inflation. We went from 9% to 3%. Like, we've won a lot of the war.
But Ben knows
we got a ways to go. But we've done a lot.
Under this administration, since he started, inflation's up cumulatively almost 19%. So, we can play the numbers game all you want. The reality is, for a lot of people out there, they're hurting. And wages on the private sector are not nearly keeping up with what we're seeing on the government side of the equation.
Yeah, it's true that it's not helpful to Biden in that he was just starting to get the tiniest little glimmer of hope on the economy. Like, people's minds were starting to turn a bit and say, okay, this economy's not so bad. The jobs market is good. My wages are a little bit over inflation. But now they get hit, with this. People don't pay attention to these nerd numbers like we do, but they notice that stuff that costs a lot more is not coming down and is just rising a little less fast. That's not great. Okay. And so he loses that momentum from a great jobs number to this.
But do I need to remind you?
Remind me.
We were supposed to be in a recession right now.
Fair enough.
So I get it. We're not having a star-spangled spectacular in terms of the economy. But think about where economists
100%.
across the board predicted we would be.
I think the lag, and I don't want to go into the weeds here at 11:45 at night on a beautiful evening, but the lag effects of those rate hikes, which I thought would kick in last year, I was 100% wrong. Just because they haven't doesn't mean they won't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what you have to be on guard about, Steph.
Yeah, I think that's true. The lagged effects are going to slow the economy more, but if inflation is still where it is now, it won't matter to the Fed. They're much more interested in getting rid of 3% inflation, getting it to 2, not letting it be sticky. That could even mean, I don't know, hikes towards the end of the year if inflation stays this sticky. That would be a scary thought if you're sitting in the White House or the re-election campaign.
Can we go back to consumer goods? Because you were just talking about this shrinkflation argument. Why do all these businesses have to offer less in their boxes? Why do they have to raise their prices? They're making money hand over fist.
So
You're talking about over-the-counter
it.
drug prices. Look at how much these companies are making.
Well, that's the argument. I understand. So now we're going down an entirely different route in terms of capitalism and free markets and stuff. I hear what you're saying, and we can have that argument, but I think it's an entirely separate argument. If you think companies are making too much money, then we're going to start to we're going to have to litigate the entire system that we're living in.
Price controls, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody wants that, Steph.
Well, there are definitely some people who do. I'm not sure anyone at this table does.
Fair enough.
However, to say that these companies have to raise their prices, they don't. So aren't they contributing to the situation that we're in?
So here we go. And Ben has thoughts on this as well. You know, you want to pay people more? That's great. I'm all for it. Federal Express I think in August announced, right, or UPS, excuse me.
UPS.
They had with their drivers over the next 5 years, $170,000 annual pay. That's fantastic.
And
Guess
then what did
happened?
they do? Massive layoffs.
Massive layoffs. So there's an other side of the equation here, right?
There is. And they are going to be very fast always to pass their cost increases on to consumers. And I agree with you, Stephanie, that there are examples of gouging where there doesn't need to be in profits that are outside what we would really like to see. But again, you'd have to reorganize the economy to deal with a lot of that. But it's clearly going to be a problem for the president and for the Fed. And part of the reason we're here is because they started way too late in fighting inflation when it started. Remember all the transitive stuff, like this is going to go away. So they had to raise a lot. They had to raise fast. And we're going to see the impacts of that on the economy as we go forward.